Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Yes, I'm Matthew when I'm writing my name for a paper or when I'm in trouble with my wife. But in general, I prefer Matt. And as thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you inviting me here. And most of my work is with virtual agents. I'm trying to get back into working with robots, but I think what I'm going to talk about today will be relevant. And I wanted to talk about how people want to teach robots. And then as I was writing this talk, I realized, well, maybe I care more about how people should teach robots. So this is going to be a little bit of more of a speculative talk. Let me start by framing and saying I'm interested in sequential decision tasks. So agent interacting with the environment, like most of us are, this could be with or without a reward. And one of the things we've been thinking about is, where does this reward come from? Because a lot of reinforcement learning people think God comes down and hands you an MDP. In the real world, maybe you don't have that reward. Maybe that should come from people. Maybe people should help you define it. But let me try something. I'd like you to get ready to type in the chat window. And just as a quick exercise warm-up, how do people teach or help robots? Drop some ideas. We just heard a ton of them in lightning talks. I'm looking for quantity, not quality. So how do people teach? Inconsistently, yes. Yeah, people are soft, squishy, and inconsistent. What kind of modalities do people use to teach robots or help them learn? Screaming at them, yep. Language, kinesthetic feedback, intervention, awesome. Guidance, yep. Teleoperation, corrections, nice. Going back and fixing things, definitely multimodal. Okay, any others? When you're thinking about corrections, this could be critiques, could be individual actions, it could be high-level things, could be natural language. Yeah. Scaffolding, curriculum learning, directing them around, reward. Awesome. Okay, good. So at least for me, this is early in the morning. So I'm hoping for those of you who are also on your first Red Bull, that this helps you think a little bit. I mean, there really are so many ways that we can help out robots. And what's the right way to do this? I mean, the first one that I want to focus on is not so much rewards, but human feedback. So think about how you might teach a dog. So of all these ways people could help, let's just focus on one of them to start. So there's a plethora of ways that we could teach robots. I don't think we have a great idea of when and where which modality is best, but let me zoom in on just one of those, just feedback. So back in 2006, Andrea and Cynthia had this work where they were letting people basically give rewards. They were having the human be the reward function. And even though they got specific guidance, humans tried to give rewards that were directed in the future. So this is, for those of you who haven't done human studies yet, this is a really common thing. Humans don't do what you want them to. They don't read the instructions but we do the best we can. So this was one of the early works looking at how humans could give feedback. And then there's a work by Brad and Peter with the Tamer algorithm. So this was more of a supervised learning approach. So instead of having the reward from the environment, now you have a supervised learner. So this learner is trying to figure out, will the human give me a positive or a negative or a zero? So the human reward is basically +1, 0, -1. And the supervised learner is saying, well, the human's giving me these numbers, and I think they're going to correlate with the return. So basically, the human is going to be rewarding me for doing what is the correct action given my long-term goals. So here in Tamer, again, the human feedback is numeric. Oh, and I should also mention, these methods are awesome. So these methods were absolutely able to learn well. Brad had this awesome example with Tetris, where a human could teach the agent to learn Tetris in like 2 episodes. And then he went on and showed some cool stuff on a robot. But then there's other work. Robert and others, Robert Lofton said, Tamer is awesome, but what if the human is not giving numeric reward? What if the human is actually giving categorical rewards? So could we take a Bayesian approach and try to say, given this, this sequence of observations, actions, and feedback, can we figure out what the human is trying to communicate? And think of it, and if we were really motivated by dog training. So it turns out you don't give dogs electric shocks. Don't do that to your robot either. We have a puppy, and when we train Luna, we tell her to do something. When she doesn't do it, we don't do anything. We don't punish her. We just withhold the reward. And then when she does the right thing, then we give her a treat. So this is one way of training, but you could think of another person training as only, well, let's say you're teaching undergrads. When the undergrad does the right thing, you don't say anything. And when the undergrad does the wrong thing, then you make them feel bad. And that's another way of teaching. And if you treat these feedbacks as categorical, maybe you can figure out how the person is teaching. And in some cases, you can learn faster. So this is a third way of thinking about the feedback. And then James invented the coach algorithm. And here his insight was, what if humans aren't giving you strictly categorical feedback? What if they're telling you about how good your policy is now relative to what it was before? So if you're getting better, the human will give you more reward. And if you do a decent thing, but it's worse than what you were doing, the human might give you a negative feedback. So in this case, you can really treat the feedback from the human as relative to how you were doing before. And in some cases this happens, and in some cases you can improve. So in all of these studies, you could say, oh, we came up with a new way of understanding human feedback. And look, it works better than the previous. My line is higher than the other guy's line. And that gives you a paper. And that's awesome. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy writing papers. I love reading papers. But then taking a step back, what does this tell us about how humans give feedback? When we have a new problem, what way do we want to interpret humans' feedback? And this is just humans giving feedback, maybe saying good robot, not saying anything, or bad robot. So that's only 3 options. And there's all these different ways of interpreting that. And this is just one of the ways that humans can help robots. So I think the main theme for this talk is, wow, there's a lot of stuff we need to learn. So this was just thinking about human feedback. And now let me switch to kind of 4 open questions, starting with, again, this theme of feedback. So one of the things we thought of, Callie had a recent workshop paper in my group on this, and we were thinking, can we teach people to be better teachers? So let's say I want to use the Tamer algorithm, and the Tamer algorithm has certain assumptions, just like the other ones. Maybe through coaching, through instructions, through practice, we can get people to give better feedback. And better feedback in this case means the algorithm can learn faster from it. So we have some pretty preliminary results in grid worlds showing that yes, so in this case, we were looking at trying to define what an important state was. So for instance, if you're right next to the lava and you don't fall into the lava, if the agent does the right thing, that's a great place to reward them. And we found we could influence this a little bit. So there's some evidence, like you'd expect, that if you grab some human subjects, you can coach them and help them to give you better advice, give your agent better advice. Well, that's cool. I mean, we always want better advice, but should it be us trying to adapt the humans? And another way you could think about this is, really, we want our algorithms to adapt to the people that are training us. So what I'd really like to do, which I haven't done, I'm not sure if other people have done, if you've seen this work, please let me know so I don't replicate it. What I'd really like to do is have people give feedback and see which of those 3 or 4 kind of modalities it falls into. Are the people thinking of this as a number? Are they thinking of it as a category? That would be pretty cool if we could automatically recognize what the human thinks their feedback is trying to do, because ultimately we want our agents to adapt to us, not the other way around. So if you've seen that study, I'd love to know that. And then you come up with interesting things like, well, what if the human is giving us feedback in a way we haven't anticipated? It's not one of those 4. Can we try to adapt to that? Or can the human, we've seen some evidence in previous studies that humans might change the way they teach over time, even within, a 20-minute study. Because humans are annoying. No, because humans are learning on their own and they might be adapting to the algorithm, even if we want to adapt to them. Well, one study we did run was looking at humans trying to provide curricula. So this was not feedback. This was, Bay was thinking about how humans could sequence a bunch of tasks. And when you pick a task, also say what the goal is. So for instance, bring the red bag to the blue room. And we found that humans could design curricula, which were okay. But then when we analyzed the data, when we went back, we found some biases in the way that humans design these curricula, like you'd expect. And when we incorporated those biases into our curriculum learning algorithm, we were able to exploit them. So this was a run the study, figure out the bias, afterwards, post-process, be able to use it. But I would love to come up with more algorithms that could do that on the fly. Adapt to the algorithm, have the algorithm adapt to the human, figure out the human's biases, figure out how the human's trying to teach, and exploit that. So this is really great for fundamental research. Recently, I've been working with, in a more commercial setting sometimes, and thinking about, okay, you're an amazing roboticist. You've got this human interaction. Humans can teach you. The CEO of a new company comes up to you. Maybe the CTO says, okay, I've got this robotics problem. How are you going to teach my robot? How can humans help me? And I think that the answer right now is, I don't know, let me take a 3 months or so, design a pilot study and get back to you. Because this is going to depend on what data do you already have? What is the setting? A medical setting is going to be very different from a delivery robot setting, which is very different from a controlled factory. It's going to depend on the robot morphology. What can it do? What I'd like to think a little bit about is focusing just on the characteristics of the task and the characteristics of the teacher. So for instance, let's just think about, when would I want demonstrations versus when would I want the person to give feedback? So Brad Knox's example was, I can't fly a helicopter, but I can give a -1 when it crashes. So there was a 2011 paper that made a start on this, but what my current hypothesis is, people who can play a game well can give good feedback, give good demonstrations. They can also give good feedback. But if they can play that game well, that demonstration is going to be relatively high quality, and it's probably going to be more useful than feedback. However, as the person gets worse at that game, or the game gets faster, maybe their demonstrations are so noisy, they're not as useful as just giving feedback or high-level advice or something that they can do a little bit slower. So right now, we're running a bunch of experiments just looking for correlations. So have people play a game, have people give demonstrations, have people give feedback, and let's try to start to understand just this one question: where would demonstrations be better than feedback? Because when someone comes and asks you, how should my human teach a robot? Boy, there's a lot of options. And it'd be great to start getting some, at least empirical guidance on when we might be able to do that. So the fourth and final research question I'll bring up is explainability. So this has been pretty hot in supervised learning. In reinforcement learning, we're a lot farther behind. I have had a student, Britt, who paper under submission showing that we can use explainability to help people select between two agents and say which is better, or maybe use it, show an agent with and without explainability. Can you better predict what the agent is going to do? Well, if the explanation's working, you better be able to do that. So there is some work on explainability in RL. What I don't think there's a whole lot of work on that this community might be interested is understanding how explainability helps teaching. So this kind of seems obvious. If your agent, if your robot is explainable, it seems like then the human teacher would better understand how to help the human, whether giving feedback or guidance or curriculum. If the human understands what the robot doesn't know, it seems like you should be able to exploit that. So again, if you've seen a study like that, I would love to hear about it, because right now we're planning on running that just to show this thing that seems obvious. So the last point I'll make briefly is we recently released a tool that I think this community might be in, the HIPPO Gym, a backronym for the Human Input Parsing Platform for OpenAI Gym. And we went to go make a website for that. And it turns out there is already a HIPPO Gym in Europe. I believe it's Eastern Europe, they've got this fitness center. So we're not the first HIPPO Gym. We're the first computational HIPPO Gym. So in HIPPO Gym, on the left, we can see breakout, and you can see that this is all over the internet. The participant can click start and say good and bad. You could also do like hit the plus and minus on your keyboard or the up and down on your keyboard. On the right, you can see Lunar Lander, where you can control it. Again, using the mouse to click the buttons or the keyboard. The full interface contains a lot more things like increasing speed, slowing down speed, letting you click on a place if there's an error. And our hope is that you can use this to more quickly run lots and lots of human subject experiments. So the goal is that it's simple to set up, integrates with Amazon, and there's a bunch of examples so that if you want to run hundreds of subjects through a virtual setting to complement your 10 subjects that you get in your robot setting, hopefully HIPPO Gym is a platform that you can leverage. So if you'd like to use that, please do. If you have questions, let us know. So before I conclude, I'll just point out, as most professors, this is not my work. This is the work of my awesome students. I'm just privileged to be able to talk about it with you all today. And I'm not sure I provided so many answers. What I tried to do is really emphasize that this is an awesome community. And together, I think we can absolutely address a lot of these from both empirical and theoretical directions. And I really think we can make a lot of progress, and that progress is really needed. So as a side note, if you are interested in a postdoc, we always have openings. It's probably too late for PhD students, but if you like the stuff that our lab does, feel free to reach out to me.